A couple of months ago, I talked about 3 upcoming IPOs, including the one I said I was most personally interested in, Rivian. And soon after that video, right on cue, the company confidentially filed for an IPO. And then about a month ago, they made their filing public. And now this week, they released more details in an amended filing. So today, I'll go through the highlights of the filing, go over some of the details of the IPO, and share some of my own personal thoughts on it, including my plans on buying or passing on the stock. So if you've been waiting for a Rivian IPO and want all the details on it, then this video is for you. Welcome to Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise. I'm Kevin, and we talk a lot about investing and improving our financial wellness on this channel. And as many of you know, we also focus a lot on IPOs because there's been so much interest in them from many of you in the community. Now last year and the beginning of this year, the IPO market was super hot. But then we hit a lull, but there was a lot of companies coming out, but not many ones to get too excited about. At least I couldn't. But Rivian, that's what I'm excited about, and I would say a lot of you are too. And as I told you in the preview video, this is a company I've been personally interested in and watching for a few years now. Today we'll look at the background of the company and what makes them intriguing, where they're heading as a company, details of the IPO, and I'll give you my own thoughts on if buying Rivian stock at the IPO makes sense. So with that, let's start with a little background on the company. For those of you just learning about Rivian, you might already know that they're an electric vehicle company focusing on segments of the market that most EV companies hadn't started in, those being in passenger pickup trucks and larger SUVs. Which seems a little crazy because trucks and SUVs make up a huge part of the passenger vehicle market in the US, and yet most EV automakers focused on traditional cars. Now having said that, focusing on smaller traditional coupes and sedans made sense because smaller vehicles have less weight and wind resistance, resulting in more range and efficiency as battery technology was still evolving. And that was really important because one of the biggest impediments to widespread adoption of EVs has been range anxiety, where people are worried that their battery runs out and they're left stranded. Now back to Rivian. What some of you may not know is that the company didn't actually set out to be a truck and SUV EV company back in 2009. They actually looked to develop a sports car. But by 2012, the strategy began to move away from building an efficient sports car, and the company began moving in the direction that they're at today. And that left Rivian finding its niche in the growing EV market by focusing on trucks and SUVs where most other EV companies hadn't gone. And even since they developed that change in strategy close to 10 years ago now, there still hadn't been a competing EV truck come to the market. While Tesla and the traditional automakers have made plans to bring a passenger truck to market, including Ford, who has invested in Rivian and holds around a 5% stake in the company, Rivian was able to start from the bottom up in building their company and delivering their first orders of their truck in September of this year, allowing them to have the cachet of being the first company to bring an electric pickup truck to the consumer market. So let's talk a little bit about the 3 initial products Rivian is bringing to market, which if they do well, could likely set the company up for big future successes. The first one is the truck, named the R1T, which as I mentioned has already started deliveries. The R1T is a 2-row, 5-passenger pickup truck that, at a length of 218 inches, puts it within the mid-sized truck market. Think of the Chevy Colorado or the Toyota Tacoma as a comparison. Now of course what separates Rivian from those trucks is that it's all electric, which means that driving range is a big consideration, particularly for more rural areas of the country where trucks are really popular and where people generally have to drive further to get to the places they need to go. So to that point, for the R1T at launch, the driving range on a full charge is reported to be 314 miles. However, by as soon as next year, they're looking to increase that by delivering trucks with a range option of over 400 miles. Now the big question for someone considering buying the R1T is this a real truck? And that's an important question if you're also looking to invest in the company. Because if consumers don't see it meeting the needs of a truck, then the product will ultimately fail. So without the luxury of being able to test one, although if Rivian were to send me one, I'd review it for you guys, so your move Rivian. But since I don't have one, I have to look at some of the stats and specs that have been released, and as far as the eye test goes, I think the truck would compete very well in the mid-sized truck segment. The bed isn't huge at 4.5 feet long, but it is competitive in size with its crew cab short bed competitors. But what does separate it is that it does have the ability to tow 11,000 pounds, way outpacing the Colorado, Tacoma, and the Ford Ranger. And as far as off-roading capabilities, its quad-motor all-wheel drive configuration provides instant power and response while independently adjusting torque at each wheel for optimal traction, propelling the truck from 0 to 60 miles per hour in approximately 3 seconds. And according to Rivian, each vehicle can wade in up to 3 feet of water and avoid obstacles with up to 15 inches of ground clearance. So they definitely want you to see it has the off-road credentials that its marketing leads you to believe it would have. Okay, so that's the R1T truck. Obviously this isn't a product review, so we're not going to go over everything it does or talk about all the optional accessories. The purpose of this video is for us to make sure that the product makes the company viable and therefore investable. So hopefully the details I share with you help you decide if the truck can be competitive in the market. Now let's talk about the SUV, and it's named the R1S. The R1S is based on the same R1 platform as the truck, and unlike some electric SUVs, it has enough space to comfortably fit up to 7 passengers. Having the same platform, it has similar capabilities to the R1T, so in the interest of time, I won't repeat all of that. But some of the major differences are that it's a little shorter at 202 inches, and its towing capacity comes at a lower 7,700 pounds. Rivian was sure to put the utility in a sport utility vehicle as it has a flexible interior form factor that can either fit more occupants or more cargo as the rear seats can be folded as needed. As far as a timeline for the SUV being available, Rivian looks to start delivering orders of the R1S in December. So those are the 2 initial products Rivian has for the consumer market. But I mentioned there were 3 products because they also have a commercial product waiting in the wings, and this is a very intriguing part of the Rivian IPO story. In the commercial market, the company will launch the Rivian commercial vehicle platform with their first vehicle called the Electric Delivery Van, or as they call it, the EDV. The EDV was designed and engineered by Rivian in collaboration with Amazon, a company that not only initially invested in Rivian and holds about a 20% ownership stake, but who also became their first official customer. In September 2019, they entered into an agreement with Amazon under which Amazon ordered 100,000 EDVs. Now, as per the prospectus, Rivian expects to deliver at least their first 10 vehicles to Amazon in the month of December of this year. And then they plan to deliver the rest of the 100,000 EDVs by 2025, and then look to further continue the relationship with Amazon. The EDV will be built in 500, 700, and 900 cubic feet sizes. The 500 and 700 size vans are planned to launch first, and then the 900 will come later. Each of the configurations are expected to have up to a 150-mile range. Okay, so that's what Rivian brings to the table as far as the products they'll be selling. Typically, this is where I would dig into the financials to see what kind of growth they're having. And for the sake of due diligence, I'll touch on it, but obviously since they are just now beginning to deliver orders, there's not much revenue to talk about. So for all intents and purposes, other than some interest received on some invested money, their income is essentially zero. Now on the expense side, that's a much different story, so let's see what Rivian is reporting as far as where they are spending their money. First up are the operating expenses. You can see that in the first 6 months of 2021, as they were ramping up to release their vehicles by the end of the year, that their losses almost equaled their entire losses of 2020, which was around $1 billion. And not surprisingly, 2/3 of their losses were spent on research and development. The rest of the expenses were mostly focused on scaling their operations and administrative purposes. Now, needless to say, if you're considering buying into the Rivian IPO, you're looking at the future and what the company can generate. So let's look at some numbers here. Right now, the company reports it can manufacture 150,000 vehicles annually at its Illinois plant, and they look to increase that number to 200,000 by 2023. And they're also looking to buy a second factory, which of course will cost a lot more money. In fact, Rivian is expecting to spend another $8 billion in the next 2 years. Keep that $8 billion in mind. We're going to come back to that number. Anyways, that $8 billion is on top of the $10 billion that they've already spent to get this far. Starting a car company isn't cheap. Now, as of their filing, the company had just under 50,000 pre-orders of their consumer vehicles. To buy one, whether the truck or the SUV, each will cost around $70,000. So if we simplify this and say that Rivian could sell all 150,000 vehicles they build in a year, they could generate $10.5 billion. Now, of course, that's not the profit, that's just the revenue. And that's probably on the low side because the company is looking for other ways to generate additional revenue from each of the vehicles they sell. In fact, in the S1 filing, the company states some assumptions. They assume that from each vehicle they sell, they'll earn about an additional $15,500, which includes autonomous driving capabilities of $10,000, and a monthly subscription plan for infotainment, connectivity, diagnostics, and other services valued at $5,500. They also expect to earn lifetime revenue of $3,500 for the service of each vehicle and additional revenue for financing, as well as additional revenue for their commercial vehicles. When they add in the resale of the vehicles, Rivian believes that the total additional revenue that they can obtain from each vehicle sold, so this is on top of the original price, is $67,900 for each consumer vehicle and $64,600 for each commercial vehicle. So you can start to see the additional value Rivian will have by getting customers into their ecosystem. Basically, each vehicle sold could generate almost twice the revenue of the initial sale price according to their projections. Okay, so let's get to the Rivian IPO itself. As of this recording, Rivian is expecting to raise about $8 billion. Remember, that was the number I said to keep in mind for the amount of money that they would need over the next 2 years. Well, here at the IPO is where that money is coming from. And they'll do this by planning to sell 135 million shares of Class A Rivian stock within a range of $57 to $62 at their IPO, as stated in their latest amended S-1 filing that came out this week. If priced at the midpoint of the proposed range, Rivian would command a fully diluted market value of $57.1 billion. Now I'll get back to some thoughts on this valuation in a minute, but first I want to tell you more about the IPO. As far as how to find it, Rivian stock will trade under the ticker RIVN. And as to when it will start trading, I don't have this exactly nailed down yet, but it looks to start trading the week of November 8th, with some early indications that trading will begin on Wednesday, November 10th. Now, don't hold me to the exact date at this point, but when I do have a firm date, I'll let you guys know. So definitely make sure you have your notification bell turned on so you'll know as soon as I share it. And then after it starts trading, Rivian will follow a standard 180-day lockup for its pre-IPO shares. If you're not sure what lockup agreements are and why they're important to be aware of, I'll link some information on them for you in the description. Alright, so what do I think of buying Rivian stock after it IPOs? Obviously, as I've already told you guys, I've been interested in Rivian for a long time, so buying into the actual company is intriguing to me. The big pluses for me are that they achieve first mover status by being the first company to bring an electric pickup truck to market, and it does seem to be a legit truck that could compete well in the mid-sized consumer market, and I've seen some independent reviews that seem to support this. Another big thing is its relationship with Amazon. Not only as an investor in the company, but also being a customer with that agreement of them buying 100,000 EDVs within the next 5 years. Now a couple of negatives. Number one is that it's a new company that will likely have growing pains when it comes to production. To me, that's pretty much inevitable, particularly in a near-term environment with supply chain issues. But even aside from that, look at Tesla as an example. They weren't flawless in their execution, and they had some of their own growing pains in which there were a lot of concerns until even just a couple of years ago that they could deliver on what they were projecting. And by that point, they were already selling cars and still had those concerns out there. And to go along with this, the segments that Rivian is initially targeting are segments where the competition is looking to enter as soon as early next year. In the preview video, I talked about Tesla's Cybertruck being a competitor, but I said maybe not as direct as you might think because of the styling. Rivian is targeting more of the traditional truck market by its design, whereas the Tesla look is completely different, with a lot of people calling it futuristic, but whatever you call it, people either love or hate the look of it. Myself, I know I definitely prefer the look of the Rivian over the Tesla. Now, which one do you guys prefer? Let me know in the comments. I'm curious what you guys think. Now, I think the underlying technology is where the true competition with Tesla could be, and that will be interesting to see how that plays out. Now, on the other hand, a company such as Ford, which, as I said before, is an investor in the company, could emerge as a bigger competitor by electrifying its F-150, a truck that in many years is the overall best-selling vehicle in the US. Recently, Ford has reported that it has 160,000 orders for the electric version of this truck that is expected to release in the spring of 2022, with a predicted entry price of around $40,000, and that price point could potentially really hurt Rivian depending how the electric Ford truck turns out. Plus, being that the F-150 is a bigger truck, it may not be a direct competitor, but it could appeal to truck drivers who feel bigger is better, and if the pricing ends up being lower than Rivian, that could hurt. Now, on top of that, there are expectations of a mid-size electric Ranger coming to market as well, which would be the most direct competitor yet. But a timeline on this is sort of vague at this point, although it appears that 2025 could be the target. In that case, Rivian would have a couple of years head start in this segment, which would be huge. Okay, so the other big thing is the price to buy into Rivian's IPO. So right off the bat, we know it's not going to be cheap at a current expected valuation of just under $60 billion. This is actually less than the $80 billion valuation that was predicted. However, that still doesn't make it cheap. As a comparison to automotive behemoth and investor Ford, who has been around for over 100 years and sold millions and millions of vehicles, Ford is worth around $70 billion as I record this, whereas Rivian has delivered only 156 of their trucks by the end of October and could go public close to that valuation. So yeah, the valuation is all about the future growth, not at all at the current sales. And the valuation in the $50 to $60 billion range we're talking about for Rivian is assuming that the IPO won't price above the range or get upsized, which I would very much anticipate to happen considering the interest in the company. Again, I'll update the community if that happens. Now, as a comparison to the valuation that Rivian was last pegged at, it came at just under $28 billion in January, so the valuation is expected to double at the very least in under a year. The good thing is that the company is now producing and delivering vehicles, so that's a huge milestone that's been achieved, and I'm sure is a big part of the timing of the Rivian IPO and how it can price its shares more aggressively. So at this point, the big question is, will I buy into the IPO? For those of you who have been with me for a while, you know I always come back to price, and that's one of the big issues here. There's a lot to like about Rivian, and I do like them, but I realize to buy into the company, it's going to come at a premium. Plus, I'm worried about the rate of the increasing competition and the time frame competitors look to get into the market. So Rivian is not a company that I can easily say I'll hold a couple of years and see how it pans out. It needs to deliver consistently quarter over quarter out of the gate. The luxury of time is not on their side. Because of my long-term interest in the company, my heart says to start with a small position and then add to it when it makes sense. On the other hand, my mind says that having to share the market with deeper-pocketed companies sooner than later makes it a risky trade, particularly if the stock comes out as hot as I would expect, and I probably should stay away from it. So what will I likely do? First, I'm not telling you what you should do because I never tell anyone what to do with their own hard-earned money, but for me, if the Rivian stock comes out within 20% or so of its IPO price, I'll probably take a small position and then, as I said before, consider adding to it over time when it makes sense. That way, I'll try to balance my own personal FOMO tendencies and issues with my logical identification of risk factors, which would typically keep me away from it. Even if it trades lower than I think, I don't see myself going all in on Rivian stock. It's just going to be too expensive and too risky for my tastes based on all the factors we've touched on. 25 years of experience investing in the stock market tells me that. So that's my take. What's yours? Are you buying into the Rivian IPO? Let me know in the comments. I always enjoy hearing what everyone in the community thinks. And I hope you found the video helpful, and if you did, please like it and share it with anyone you think would find it interesting. We're always looking to grow our community so that we can have more ideas shared in the comments, so if you're new here, definitely consider subscribing. It's totally free, and it'll make sure you don't miss any new videos as soon as they come out. And if you're interested in seeing some of my non-financial type of videos, I hope you check out and subscribe to my second channel, How To with Kevin, where I share my experiences of other things I've learned to tackle, or things that come up that I figure out and I bring along with me. And you can also follow me on Instagram. All that information is in the description. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, have a great day.